Mew Vmax is it's a pestilent. It is a scourge on this game, and it's a deck that I've despised since the beginning. Like, it was made just to keep me from winning. If you could tell me, if you could tell me where I ripped that line from, I'll get you a code card in the video. Put it in the comments. Tell me where I ripped that from. Today, we're talking about Mew Vmax. We're going to be looking at everything you need to know regarding Mew Vmax, and we're going to talk about the meta. We're going to talk about the skeleton list. If you're looking to play Mew Vmax, maybe you saw Pablo Mesa make top 4 with Mew at EUIC, and you said, you know what? This is a deck I gotta try. There's a league battle deck. You can go and buy it pretty easily and get the card. So you say, I want to try this. So what's the meta look like? What are the different versions of Mew? Where do we get started? And how does it do against other decks? That's what we're going to be looking at today. So let's get right into it. We are at Trainer Hell, and I have a link to Trainer Hell in the video description. Also, I want to show the meta because I think it's super important for us to understand what decks we are likely to encounter. If we're going to play Mew, we have to know what we're going to be playing against, at least to the best of our ability. So looking at the meta is really important. You can see on the left-hand side, we have the overall meta. This is for the entire month of April. And I'll scroll down so you can see the tournament filters. At least, a few players between the April 1st and April 30th, and run by all organizers. This is like as broad as you can get this. That's what I did here. So on the left, you have overall, and on the right, you have the last 7 days. You can kind of take a moment, pause this video, compare the two different metas. I do think if you're going to go to a league challenge or a league cup at the like this weekend, I'd probably look last 7 days to see what's really been popping up, but that's just me. Gardevoir is really popular. Lost Zone is really popular. Mew is also really popular. So if you're going to play Mew, you have to keep in mind you're probably going to hit a mirror or two. It's just the way it goes. You might hit those Goodgers. You're probably going to hit some Lugia, although Lugia has seen quite the drop-off. I shouldn't say quite the drop-off. It's a little dramatic, but, it's seeing a little bit of decreased play. And then we have our second Mew. So the two Mews we're talking about here are Mew Genesect, which I will call DTE or Double Turbo Energy Mew, and then we have Fusion Strike Mew, because one uses only Double Turbo energies and the other uses Fusion Strike energies and also Double Turbo energies, but you can guess which one's which, right? So that's the meta. Why don't we go ahead and get a look at what the different skeleton lists are for these decks. So we are going to be starting with DTE Mew, just regular old Mew Genesect, because it's the more popular of the two, and we'll start there. Most of this is pretty concrete with a skeleton list of 55, or core card list of 55 cards. That is really, really, like, there's not a lot of room for rearranging, especially when some of these cards are played in such high counts. Every single Mew Genesect deck is running, or DTE Mew is running 4 Genesect. You're just not getting around it. Everyone's running, for the most part, the same number of cards. Some of the exceptions are for things like Lost Vacuum. You can see a little bit of change in the number of Lost Vacuums. Some are running 2, 3, 4. If you are wondering what makes somebody run 2, 3, or 4 Lost Vacuums, it is directly correlated with the number of Path to the Peaks that they are playing or that they're worried about. So you can see there's a little bit of variation in Path to the Peaks played. There's a tiny bit of variation in the amount of judges, but really at the moment, Mew Genesect's idea is I'm not going to hit as hard, as quickly as some of the other decks, but I'm going to disrupt you, right? You have the 3 Ds of Mew. Draw, I'm thinking of dodgeball. You got the 5 Ds of dodgeball, and then you have the 3 Ds of Mew. Honest to God, I tried to think of 5 Ds for Mew, and I just couldn't do it. You have draw cards, discard cards, and dodge Drapion. And if you want to really stretch that, you can maybe make it the 4 Ds. But anyway, we got the 3 Ds of Mew. We got 4. We got draw cards, discard cards, disrupt our opponents, and Dodge Drapion. And man, if I come up with another fifth one on the spot, I'm gonna be real happy. Anyway, so Mew Genesect, the whole idea is the difference between Mew Genesect and Fusion Strike Mew is disruption. You are running often a higher Path to the Peak count and more copies of Judge, because the idea is we're gonna use Path to the Peak to turn off abilities. And yes, I know that turns off your own Genesect's ability, but we'll get there in a second. You play Path to the Peak and you Judge, and you say, okay, my opponent better be able to get out of this somehow. And we don't really have a ton going on. We have just Genesect and Mew. The odds of us finding the Pokemon we need, or between all of our item cards, Cramormatics and Battle VIP Pass, Ultra Balls, things like that, for the Forest Seal Stone, like we can find whatever we want, right? So you go ahead, you put the Path to the Peak in play, you Judge, and you say, okay, now I'm going to hit you for 210 damage, pretty consistently, or 190 damage because of the double turbo energy. I'm going to do that pretty consistently, and also this Path to the Peak is in play, so deal with it. Now, we need to do our other D. We need to do the other thing, which is draw cards, and that's where Genesect comes in. We're going to be able to draw cards thanks to Fusion Strike system. Genesect V's ability says, draw as many cards, or draw until you have as many cards in your hand as you do Fusion Strike Pokemon in play. Well, that's pretty good and pretty easy to do, considering we have the Battle VIP Pass, and we have the Ultra Ball, and we just have Genesect to draw a bunch of cards. So that's the first, or the second D. We have Disrupt with Judge Path, and we have Draw with Genesect. Now, I said that Path to the Peak, it turns off Genesect's ability, but this is why decks that run high Path Judge counts also run high Lost Vacuum counts. The idea is you have Path to the Peak in play, or your opponent has Path to the Peak in play. You Lost Vacuum it, which means you get it off the board, so now you can use your Genesect's abilities, and because you also run a high Path to the Peak count, you just slap that Path to the Peak back down into play so that your opponent can't use their abilities, but you still manage to use yours. Can you do that every single turn? No, but the ones you can kind of lock them out early. You have Forest Seal Stone, which lets you search your deck for any card you want. You can use that even with Path to the Peak in play. So if we really need to get Path to the Peak out of play, Forest Seal Stone says we just go and get a Lost Vacuum, and we can bump that Path to the Peak pretty easily. So there you go. That's kind of how that works. The rest of the deck is, it's really not a whole ton going on. We really want to find a Battle VIP Pass at the beginning of the game. We can use Cramormatic to discard an item card. Flip a coin. If heads, we search our deck for any card we want. This is incredible. So if it's turn 1, we go ahead, flip, discard an item card, use Cramormatic. If it's heads, we go and get a Battle VIP Pass. And now we're kind of already off to the races. We're going to be able to get a couple of Genesects, maybe a Mew, depending on what we have in the active. And there you go. You just fill out your bench and start drawing cards. Now you have the other D, the third D, which is, as we said, discard cards. Why on earth do we want to discard cards? Well, we want to be able to discard cards out of our hand so we can thin our hand out and then draw more with Genesect. And we just kind of go back to D number 2. And that's the idea. We discard cards with Cramormatic. We put a card into the Lost Zone with Lost Vacuum. We discard 2 cards from our hand with Ultra Ball. We have a few different ways of discarding cards. So we get those cards out of the hand, draw with Genesect, and see new things. We also have a little bit of draw opportunity with Judge, by the way. We got a couple of Boss's Orders for extra disruptions, Escape Rope for some maneuverability, Choice Belt to let us hit a little bit harder, Nest Ball to help find some basic Pokemon, Pal Pad to recover some of our supporters. Roxanne is the supporter that we might want to use Pal Pad on. Boss's Orders is another really good one. And then our 4 copies of Double Turbo Energy, because that's our only source of energy to attack with. So, yeah, that's Mew, the whole thing about Mew Genesect. And then we have some other common cards, things that we might want to play. Maybe we don't want to play such a high Path to the Peak count. We can go ahead and play Lost City. I would probably play Lost City if I was really concerned about Lost Zone decks. That's just me. I don't really care too much about Path to the Peak in a lot of Lost Zone decks. They do run Radiant Charizard. They do run Sableye. Moisture Star is kind of annoying if you're going against Goodra, but I would probably play Lost City. That's just me. You got switch cards. Avery is another really good supporter you might want to throw in there. But the problem is you don't want to run too many supporters. Because if you have a lot of supporters, then your hand gets clogged up with them. You draw into them with Genesect. And then you either have to discard them or not draw any extra cards. And that kind of stinks. So Heavy Ball's a pretty decent option. Silene's a decent option. You just find 5 cards. Let's say you take this exact 55 card core. You find 5 cards you like based on, you play a few games, see what you like, see what you don't like, what do you need, what do you want. Maybe Echo Horn is for you, maybe you need extra switch. I don't really know, but you just go ahead and you play and you test and you figure it out. So there you go, that's DTE Mew or just Mew Genesect. Fusion Strike Mew is already pretty different. I mean, obviously they're very similar archetypes, right? We're just changing them how we go ahead and do things. So Fusion Strike Mew, the main difference is that we don't have those same Ds as we did we don't have the same objectives. This one is to hit hard and fast. So we really want to hit those turn 1 KOs or those turn 2 KOs if we go first, using something like the Deoxys or the Meloetta, so we can really just stop our opponent's game plan before it ever gets started. I guess that's our version of disruption. You can see that there's far fewer Path to the Peaks in this deck, and I don't even see a Lost Vacuum. It's in the other common cards. It's not even part of the core list. So what's the strategy for this deck? Well, the answer is we still want to draw and discard cards so we can use Genesect, or we use Genesect to draw, discard cards so we can draw more, right? We still have those two, but we don't have the disruption. We're not looking to play Path to the Peak Judge all the time. What we want to do is use usually Meloetta as our our initial attacker, because Meloetta's attack, Melodious Echo, says that we can do 70 damage times the number of Fusion Strike energies in play, which means if we attach a Fusion Strike energy to Meloetta, and then we play something like Elisa Sparkle that says search a deck for 2 Fusion Strike energies and attach them to search a deck for up to 2 Fusion Strike energies and attach them to 2 different Pokemon. Well, we can choose Meloetta and then choose another Pokemon on the bench. And now Meloetta has the 2 energies needed to attack. All of a sudden, we're doing 210 damage because there's 3 Fusion Strike energies in play, which is absurd to think about, that a single prize Pokemon can hit for 210 damage for 2 energies on turn, the first turn if they go second, or turn 2. Absolutely crazy. And then we have 4 power tablets and a couple of choice belts, 2 or 3, usually 2, so we can hit for even more damage on our opponent's Pokemon V, or with the choice belt. With a power tablet, we just do 30 more damage because why not? So that's really the idea. Then we have Deoxys, which also does more damage for single strike energies. So that's just kind of the idea. Really, the Deoxys is there for single prize matchups, right? Just to offset, so you don't have to constantly attack with your Mews and lose 3 prizes. And then all of a sudden, Drapion comes in because it's Lost Box, and why not? And then it just took 3 prizes. Cramorant knocks out your Meloetta, and now you're like, well, I guess I just lose. That kind of stinks. So that's really the game plan. This one is really geared towards hitting super hard. We have still the Nest Balls, the Ultra Balls, a lot of the same cards you saw in the other deck, but now we have 4 copies of the Fusion Strike Energy and only 2 copies or 3 copies of the Double Turbo Energy. So, interestingly enough, the core common cards are a little bit different, and Fog Crystal is one of them. Let you search your deck for a basic Psychic Energy or basic Psychic Pokemon. We don't run basic Psychic Energies, so we're going to get a basic Psychic Pokemon, but it's really cool to go ahead and get a Meloetta, Escape Rope, attach an energy, a Fusion Strike energy, Elisa Sparkle, and all of a sudden you hit it for 210, like we just said. Crazy. Crystal Cave is interesting, but it's really just to try to offset damage done by Cramorant and Sableye onto our Genesect, which is, it can be important, but I would really only run it if you are super concerned about Lost Box, or like, I would really only run it if you're concerned about Lost Box. I probably would, me personally, I'd probably play the Lost Vacuums. because we're not so disruption heavy, and we don't really have any draw cards outside of the 1 or 2 copies of Judge that we might run. We are a little bit more reliant on our Genesect, which means Path to the Peak can be a problem for us. So I'd probably run Lost Vacuum, 1 or 2 of them. And in this particular list, I actually think Echo Horn is better than in the Fusion Mew, because we have the opportunity to hit really hard, and sometimes later in the game you just kind of run out of a little bit of steam. So going ahead and bringing up just like Echo Horn Boss of Pokemon V or something like that is pretty nice, since maybe we only have a Choice Belt, or maybe we only have 1 more Power Tablet, and it's a little bit hard to knock out a Pokemon V Star or a bigger Pokemon EX. So I kind of like the Echo Horn on this list a little bit more, but I'm pretty sure Pablo Mesa's list used or did use an Echo Horn. I'm pretty sure. Sometimes they have the Fan of Waves to help against the Lugia matchups, which is really nice. Or they can also get rid of things like V-Guard energies, gift energies. That's really what it's used for, is not so much to make it so Lugia can't attack anymore. Like V-Guard and like the what the hell was it called? It was just in my head, the Fan of Waves. Fan of Waves used to be like, oh man, you got rid of my energies, now I can't attack. Yeah, Lugia just gets that energy right back. It's really not that big a deal. But what they do is they use the Fan of Waves to get rid of V-Guard energy, so that you don't take 30 less damage from Mew Vmax's attack. In the DTE version of Mew, when you're already hitting for 190, well, you need 2 Power Tablets to knock out, or 2 damage modifiers to knock out a Pokemon V. And then if they have something like a V-Guard energy on there, now you take it 30 less, now you need 3? That kind of stinks. And Tyranitar has 230 health, which means it's even harder to KO. So you just go ahead, get rid of that V-Guard energy, now you do your full damage, or you don't do 30 less, and it's a little bit easier to KO. So that's really nice. Or something like the gift energy, which when you knock out a Pokemon, your opponent draws until they have 7 cards in their hand. You just say, okay, buy gift energy. Now let's keep the 2 cards that I rock stand you down to. You know, they come out, they knock out a Mew Vmax, and you're like, well, okay, they have 3 prizes left. I'm going to go ahead and Roxanne them, because both these lists use Roxanne. If they have a gift energy on their Lugia or their Tyranitar or whatever, then after you knock out that Pokemon, they're just going to draw 5 cards, and they have a full hand of 7 again. So you use the Lost Vacuum, not the Lost Vacuum, the Fan of Waves, to get rid of the gift energy, so that they keep just the 2 cards you Roxanne them down to. And in the future, Iono will basically serve the same function. So Fan of Waves also maybe a pretty good option, or something you should consider. But yeah, this is the core list for. The last part of this video is matchup data, and I want to highlight Fusion Mew and Mew Genesect. Of course, really, the thing that should stick out the most to you is how polarizing Fusion Mew is. Fusion Mew has some matches that it really wins against, and some matches that it takes some hard losses to, whereas Mew Genesect is a little bit smoother of a matchup spread. Yes, there are some things that are unfavored, but nothing that you are really losing to. And if you're not familiar with how to read something like this, we are looking at, from the left-hand side, this is the deck that has the win percentage in the box. So, for example, Fusion Mew has a 30% win rate against Arceus Duraludon. Not a very good matchup spread, but it has an 86% win rate against something like Lost Zone Giratina, which is a really, really good matchup. Now, one of the things to consider is, what should you play? Like, this might give you some information, but how do we use this? Well, the answer is, if we know what we're playing, if we know, like my locals, I was at just yesterday, there was Miraidon, there were 1 or 2 Lost Box, there was a Dialga, and there was 4 Gardevoirs, 4 or 5 Gardevoirs, something ridiculous. So if I look at Fusion Mew and say, man, I do really well against Gardevoir, I can beat Miraidon, I do okay against something like Lugia, it's fairly close, you know, I'm doing well against the different Dragon Lost Zone decks, I'm slightly unfavored against something like Lost Zone Charizard, and I'm split against Lost Zone Box. At my locals, Fusion Mew is a pretty decent pick. No one's playing Urshifu and Teleon. One or two people play Arceus Duraludon, so maybe if you get lucky, you dodge that matchup or you take the one loss. But for the most part, I mean, at my locals specifically, Fusion Mew is a really good option. However, if you are unsure of what your locals are going to be like or the tournament you're going to, maybe you're new to a particular store, maybe you're traveling to a League Cup or a League Challenge, maybe you're going to a Regionals, and you say, I really want to play Mew, but I don't know which version to play, and I don't know what other people are playing. Well, then Mew Genesect, the DTE version, is probably the better bet, simply because it has a softer matchup spread. The things that you play, you're more likely to not hit a hard loss. So really, there's nothing in here that you have a very tough time with. Your worst matchup is something like Lost Box Charizard. But honestly, considering it's not that popular, you really don't have to worry about it too much. And that's why I showed at the beginning of the video the meta share, so you kind of have an idea of how much do I have to worry about Sablezard? How much do I have to worry about Arceus Duraludon if I'm going to play Fusion Mew or something like that? And kind of go from there. What I would do is look at that meta, how much of those decks are being played, and see, something like Lost Box Charizard. I don't really do well. It's not played as much. Maybe I'll get, play a couple of games, but something like Urshifu and Teleon's not really played too much. Goodra, on the other hand, has played quite a bit. And then something like Lugia has played quite a bit. Both of those matchups, you have a 51% win rate. That is extremely neutral. So what I would do is I would play the hell out of Goodra and Lugia matchups. And honestly, if you've been playing Mew for any substantial period of time, you probably have played those matchups quite a bit. But those are the ones you need to practice. Those are the ones that are 48, 47, 48, 50% win rates. Those are the matchups that you can turn something that is slightly unfavored into neutral, or something that's neutral into slightly favored, because you know it better than your opponent. That's the difference. It doesn't really help Mew Genesect to play against Fusion Mew. One, because it's not that many of them, and two, it's already a pretty easy winner. Miraidon. Play a couple of games of Miraidon just to have the plan and understand what to do. But after you kind of start, you get your handful of wins and you have your game plan against Miraidon, move on from it. You don't need to play Miraidon because you know how to beat it already. You have to spend the time playing the Mirror, playing Lugia, playing Goodra, which is a pretty good deck and also pretty popular. So that's how I would handle this. We don't need to spend a ton of time looking at this meta data, this matchup data. If you want to take a look at it again, link to Trainer Hill in the video description, or you can just pause this video and read it just from there. But yeah, that's the matchup data. Me personally, if I'm traveling to a tournament and I'm going to play Mew, which I would never play Mew. It's going to be the Fusion Strike Mew. I'm not playing the Fusion Strike Mew. It's going to be the DTE Mew, just because you're more likely to not have some hard matchups. And yeah, that's just me. And there you are. Everything you need to know to get started to play Mew right now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much, and I will see you next time.